Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Purple Political Breakdown. How's it going? How's your day been? We're we're back at it again. I do want to note something new that we plan to do. Well, at the very least, a reframing of what this already is. This is an open panel conversation. Anybody that is technically a part of my Discord can join. So if you guys want to, you can join via my link tree. But these are open dialogues based off what is important topics of the recent week. And I plan to just call them Socratic breakdowns. And one of the biggest premises behind this is anytime someone has a question that is part of like the live chats, that when we do these live shows, we will have to answer them. Obviously, if it's nonsense where it's like, you know, something racist or something homophobic or just something just stupid, we're not answering it. But if it's on brand, on topic, we will address it because it's all about pushing the dialogue forward. Of course, you have yours truly, Riddell, the host of the Purple Political Breakdown, and we have Danny here. So, how's it going,
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing, Riddell?
Doing well. Pretty. I say it all the time. I'm pretty busy. I keep myself busy for a reason, and yeah, just this kind of rebranding, I think will be good. I also want people to know that we do them live on my own socials, but once a month we'll go to that a different Discord to have conversation with people there to just get the general structure of what we're doing over here.
No, for sure. It sounds like a good idea.
So, in today's conversation, there's a few things to discuss from Donald Trump's attack on free speech regarding the James Tallarico and Stephen Colbert stuff to the Epstein stuff that we never really got to address in details. I know you have some thoughts that you want to bring to the table, as well as some of the EPA stuff that's taking place where MAGA is trying to push this idea that they're helping save money, but in reality, they're making the atmosphere more dangerous. So, we'll start off with the Epstein stuff because I know that was a looming topic. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I want to start with kind of this first major news that came up about Epstein with an interview that Hillary Clinton recently gave, arguing that she thinks Donald Trump is trying to cover something up when it comes to the Epstein files. And the Justice Department is also trying to do this. But more than likely, they are. Well, the way she argues this is happening is, first of all, Trump wants to have Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton testify before Congress and do so behind closed doors. That means that there is no transparency about what is going on during this testimony to members, to the U.S. public, which has really upset a lot of which really upset the Clintons, as well as has bothered a lot of the Democrats in addition to that. But what's more interesting then is Hillary Clinton said, well, we're fine with testifying as long as it's going to be done in the open. We think transparency should be brought to this case. And the Republicans, especially Trump, are saying, no, we don't want to do it, which is resulted in now Hillary Clinton saying that given all these redactions in the Epstein files of some of the perpetrators, which has been a big discussion, as well as given Trump wanting to do this behind closed doors, this has resulted in Hillary Clinton believing that he's doing something to try and cover this up, which is pretty big in my opinion, just given the fact that this is really the first major former U.S. politician, or one of the, not the first one, but she's a major piece in this case. She's in the files, and Bill Clinton is in the files. So I think the fact that she's saying we think you're hiding something and you don't want to share it, and we are willing to testify before Congress in front of the nation, really says something about what's actually there. Given the fact, I think in this last batch of files, Trump's name pops up like thousands of times, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, at this point, I don't know how you can't come to the conclusion that there is a very purposeful effort to ensure that certain information regarding the Epstein files does not want to get out there. And if we're having a genuine conversation, I've said this repeatedly that in terms of damning evidence, where it's like 100% certain that Trump or Bill, some of these people did bad things with young girls, that's probably not going to be in there. However, what is undeniable is the circumstantial evidence that makes it look very, very likely and very, very bad. And that is enough reason why Trump wants to move on from the Epstein files. That is enough reason why Trump doesn't want more conversation taking place. He's consistently been trying to say, let's move on, let's move on, let's move on. And that should raise alarms for you. Danny, are you able to get a Discord link and put it in the chat? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that right now. How do I
Just copy and paste it and you should be good.
Okay, where? Crap, hold on a second. I've never done that before.
All good. But it is very worrying regarding the conversation at large. I've said it multiple times. I have no allegiance to Democrats. So if Bill is indicted for being very, very creepy, then hey, man, it is what it is. If Hillary knew about this, being the wife, because Hillary and Bill's relationship is very clearly very awkward. Hey, take her too. I don't care. But this idea that they want to do a testimony behind closed doors like they did with Ghislaine Maxwell, and then we saw weeks later when people try to ask her questions, they're going like, hey, so let's talk about the co-conspirators. I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. There's already allegations out there, and a key word I'm going to say allegations, that there was some type of deal made with Maxwell that will completely, not what's the word? Not justify, completely vindicate Trump and Clinton is some of the allegations being put out there. There's probably a better term that I'm just not thinking on top of my head. But if you ever thought, especially if I'm talking about the people on the right, if you're MAGA and you believed in the dark state, you believed in the deep state, you believed that the elites were doing all the shady things behind closed door, if you went so far as to believe in the Illuminati and you believe that all these people did some crazy things to children and ate them to stay eternally youth, well, this is the best time where this is the most evidence you've ever had that, hey, very successful, very powerful people are trying to cover something up, and it looks wild. It's just crazy to me.
Oh no, it is. First of all, I want to say I tried posting the link twice and saying that this comment could not be posted by Purple Political.
Can you put it in the private chat, and I'll put it since I'm
Yeah, I'll try. Okay, see, that worked. Okay. All right, I sent it to you, and then you can put it in there. I don't know why it's not letting me put the links in.
It's probably like a moderation thing.
Yeah. But okay, so no, it's all good. So yeah, now you can join the chat. Yeah, no, I mean it's very true in that regard, and
to address this guy, he brought up that they still believe that this is true, that COVID came from a bat in the wet market and it caused everything, and China was involved and they started it. They still think this is true, by the way.
No, it's especially the case. Well, I guess what we should ask with this comment is he implying that the COVID was created in a lab and got out, or is it implying that the Chinese created it as like some sort of a weapon? We should have tried to identify, figure out what's going on there as well, I think, with the question. But overall, what I want to also say with this is it's not really much of a surprise that it might have come from the island, but it's not much of a surprise that all these people are really involved with Jeffrey Epstein, because when you get down to it, pedophilia among the elites has been a kind of a common thing for centuries, going back to multiple different empires and governments and regimes. It doesn't justify it by any means. I'm not justifying pedophilia. But what I am saying is this is kind of one of those conspiracies that in a way it makes more sense compared to other ones like, oh, if they were hiding this from us, does that mean they did 9/11, et cetera? Which no, that doesn't seem to track at all. I don't see why the government blew up its own buildings to invade Afghanistan for oil and then go to war with Iraq a couple of years later. But whatever. I'm just using that as an example because you're seeing people say this stuff now. So I think that's incredibly important overall, is to keep in mind that this is based in some amount of historical precedence. And now we're seeing this happen in the United States. And not only in the United States, but I think possibly the craziest thing, this is another thing I wanted to bring up also, is just how damn connected Jeffrey Epstein was to multiple different governments around the world. It's rather insane.
I don't necessarily believe in the idea that there's like a big cabal. I am conflicted in the idea that Epstein purposely led these people to do what they did and then had this blackmail to have some type of like power over these people. For the most part, if I was going to come to a reasonable conclusion, I do think that this was an island where there's a lot of very beautiful women, including very young women that are underage. I do think there are creeps that have that fancy, but ultimately, a lot of people went to do their biggest sexual desires over there. Some of these elites wanted to do with like normal age women. Some of them was like, you know what, this is a private island. Let me go crazy and become a disgusting piece of shit. So I think that was just an island where very powerful people can just do what they felt like, because these people, as you said, throughout history, they're elites. They have everything. They need that dopamine rush, and they just do disgusting things to kind of abide by these kind of weird, perverse desires, especially for people who are so used to control and influence that they need a weaker individual to like abide by those principles. It's just disgusting all around, especially when you get into the psychology of it. For this in particular, another very strange, not even a strange thing, a very pathetic thing is the Pam Bondi hearing that took place, where she had to answer questions from Democrats and Republicans, and her answers were awful. They were terrible. They were so unprofessional. She did the Donald Trump like insult game when she didn't feel like answering a question. There are times where she just didn't answer a question, because that's another big thing that people on the right do, is like, I'm asking you a direct question, answer it. Nope. Let me pivot to something else. Oh, hey, are you going to unredact these? Well, are you going to stop going after Donald Trump because when he was president under these unlawful? It has nothing to do with the conversation at hand, but the pivot is there so they don't have to address the very clear circumstance that is right in front of them. And not only would she not address the fact that there is a potential co-conspirators that were aligned with Epstein, that their name is redacted. Why is this wild to me? Why these potential co-conspirators' names are redacted, but also there is victims' names that were unredacted. So I'm like, who is the priority here? They also exposed Pam Bondi and the DOJ for never talking to any of the victims. And then the nail in the coffin is when they asked her, hey, what's going on with Maxwell going to like nicer prisons and being able to pet dogs? She said, well, I have nothing to do with that. So, that you are the Attorney General of the United States of America, and you don't know what the hell is going on with Maxwell and the deals. She's been working with your Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche. It is insane to me. I think it's pretty crazy. We have someone who showed up, Rinyald. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Going well. Nice to meet you. Never met you before. So tell us a little bit about yourself before you join in the conversation.
Yeah, my name is Rinyald. I do political debates online a bunch. I've been aware of your content for a little bit. Good stuff, by the way.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I generally do political conversations. I hop on streams and talk to people about politics. I'm 22, Democrat, pretty ride or die Democrat.
Nice. Okay. And I respect the shirt too. I do like AEW as well. So shout out AEW.
Real, yeah.
All right. So what are some of your thoughts about regarding the Epstein stuff?
The Epstein stuff is super complicated because I generally am hesitant to get into like the super conspiratorial claims of like a giant like deep state cabal of people trafficking people to different people. Like I just haven't seen anything to super substantiate a lot of the crazier claims that have been coming out from people on the left in general. It seems like there's a lot of bad stuff in there and like reputation ruining stuff in there. Questions about like reopening investigations or whatever. But I think it's super complicated because I'm glad that it's out there and I'm glad that the survivors are getting vindication and everything. But it's also kind of like without the release of all of the material, it just seems like it's kind of leaving people's mind open to go to a lot of places that I don't think the evidence substantiates.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think that's part of the problem here is it hasn't all been released. We're just talking about like Pam Bondi freaking out about it and trying to pivot away constantly, which makes you very suspicious as to what's going on. I have no doubt that powerful people did engage in sex acts on Epstein's island. I don't know how many of them did. We don't even know if Bill Clinton did, not Bill Clinton, well, Bill Clinton or Bill Gates did. We know they were in contact. We know that Bill Gates especially stayed in contact after he was already convicted. But there's no proof as of yet that he had sex with a minor on the island. And that's the other thing that is I think we need to keep in mind with this, because people are constantly talking about all these elites being pedophiles or involved in it because their names appear in the files. And as horrible as it is that they were maintaining contact with them, and I wish they just cut them out of their lives, we have to keep in mind that it's not illegal to technically talk to a convicted felon. It isn't. So you can, say what you want about Bill Gates. I personally have lost a lot of respect for him for it, but it's arguably not illegal what he did. So that's one thing that we should keep in mind here. The other thing, though, is we can't get in. I do believe that if it comes to it, Bill Gates and, obviously Bill Clinton, we were just talking about that earlier, Riddell, as well as anyone else mentioned it, Thomas Pritzker, for example, should all be brought forth before Congress to testify about this in public so we can get a better, more transparent understanding, because this is what Trump ran on. This is what a lot of MAGA wants. And this is also just what more or less everybody in the United States wants, because they want to know, like, hey, how involved is this? How many people were trafficked? And does the president have any connections with it? And it's seeming more and more like, Trump might have done stuff that is way worse than he's letting on.
So before, I do want to ask you a very specific question, Danny, in terms of like, especially based off your knowledge regarding like international affairs and history. But before I get that, I also want to note this, that even if I was being the most good faith possible and that all the allegations about Donald Trump and young women are not true, okay, if I was going to be the most good faith I can be, there's no way you can convince me, none, zero, you can convince me that he did not know about Epstein's operation. There is nothing you can say to me that will convince me of that, considering their close proximity, considering we know that some of the women that he had were being recruited by Epstein from Mar-a-Lago, and the frequent amount of times he was there. He was definitely aware some of those girls were underage. So that is one thing that should automatically recognize or become a realization of how much Donald Trump is a scumbag. But Danny, my question for you, and Rinyal, you can give input too, before we move on to a different part of the top conversation, is how much do you buy into the Jewish connection, the Israel connection, because although a lot of the MAGA people they're trying to be either they're going like, oh my goodness, I can't forgive this, and there are a good percentage of them that are believing that. There's another percentage of them that's completely denying everything, and then there's the conspiracy part of the right that's going like Israel, 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 as well as the left. There are people going like Israel, Israel, Israel. They're the ones responsible. They did it. They started it. So what are your thoughts on the Israel?
The best connection we have so far to it, according to these currently released files, and this has been talked about by France 24 as well. I'm trying to think of the other website that talked about it. Some more fringe anti-establishment websites talked about it. The best evidence we have, and even they can concede that there is no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was in Mossad as of right now. There is evidence that he did do work with Mossad, and it was primarily with one thing was setting up new security protocols in Mongolia, I guess for the embassy there, and they met to discuss that in Epstein's Island with the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. And then he also met with Ehud again to discuss some various security transactions going on. But there is no evidence that he was actually employed by Mossad in any way, shape, or form. It seems more or less as though Epstein was obviously he was extremely supportive of Israel. I think we can say that, but it seems more like he was a mediator than more so than anything. He got involved in these groups, and likely he was involved because he had a lot of money. He was a financier. He might have been able to provide some amount of wealth to them, to the Israelis, but there's no proof, again, that he actually worked for the Israeli government. And the same thing should also be said with his connections to Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe, who was a dictator. There's proof that he did business with him, but there's no proof that he worked for the Zimbabwean government. And same should also be said regarding Vladimir Putin and the Russians. There's evidence that he was sympathetic to Putin, but there's no evidence that he was working for the FSB and trying to dig up or basically blackmail the American elite for the Russians or the Israelis in this case, which is a common theme you see going here. Either it's doing it for the Russians or the Israelis, maybe both. There does seem to be more connections with him and the trafficking with Russia, with other oligarchs there. But again, nothing that we can see. So until, again, we get the full files released, all we're doing is basically saying like, okay, this guy talked to an Israeli prime minister, therefore he works for the Israeli government, and his father-in-law, just Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, was a member of Mossad. Therefore, he must be. It's like, no, his dad, or his father-in-law was a member. He was not a member. He might have gotten connections to get in contact with people through him, but there is no evidence he was that Jeffrey Epstein himself, under his full legal name, was employed by Mossad, is how I'd put it.
Interesting. What's your thoughts, Reno?
Yeah, I think there's a really, really big populist bend coming out from the left and the right. And I think that the populist anti-establishment types will just naturally gravitate towards more conspiratorial thinking about like giant cabals at the top of the world coordinating all with each other. But the problem is that like Danny was saying, a lot of the evidence or like damning ties are like somebody being a stone's throw away from somebody being a stone's throw away from somebody important, and then using those kind of spurious ties to tie together a big conspiracy of Jeffrey Epstein working on behalf of Mossad in order to traffic people to like. It seems like there's a big lack of substantiation with a lot of the conspiratorial stuff, which just seems pretty baked into a lot of the populist politics that we're starting to see rise. It's really hard to blame almost anybody else than the Trump administration and Donald Trump, because I blame a lot of the populist rise to the way that he conducts himself and the way that he conducts his campaigns and everything. So it's kind of like a demon of his own creation, but I don't know. It seems like a lot of the ties to, like, you could probably find anybody who's at like the top of the world and they probably have some spurious connection to Israel. I don't think it's that hard to find spurious connections between powerful people and other powerful people. It's just the question of like what those connections entail, how specific those connections are, how close the connections are, and what information we can actually gather from those connections.
Yeah, generally, I very much agree to what both of you guys are saying. Of course, I have no love lost regarding Israel by any means. If they do bad shit, I'll call it out. If they do good shit, I'll call it out, especially considering they're an ally of the Americas right now. But sometimes when it comes down to these big overarching conspiracies, it removes the substance of what we actually can prove, in the sense that there are real victims. They were trafficked. They were manipulated to this weirdo creep in Epstein. And there is like a rising amount of evidence that not only was there like rape and there is pedophilia, but there was like really nasty abuse happening at the same time. So when we started expanding the dialogue to this kind of whole system of Israel being one hand in hand with Epstein to get this information about these foreign leaders or elite business owners, it just removes us from reality a little bit too much for the conversation. But transitioning over to the next thing, and I'll let you start, Renyol. So there's a recent thing that took place. I actually went live like for 40 minutes yesterday because I was like, wait, what's trending right now? What are people talking about? And it's regarding Stephen Colbert and his interview with James Tallarico, which was removed from the mainstream network CBS, and then he uploaded it on YouTube. Now, based on what Colbert said, is he said that Brendan Carr, who is very clear, like, come on, we can understand 2 + 2 = 4. He was told by Trump to pressure Colbert to remove it. And this isn't the first time Tallarico in particular was looked at or investigated at regarding his interview, because this happened before when he did an interview with The View, and they were looking into it, and they're trying to find some way to prove that, based off FCC guidelines, that one, they're trying to challenge that talk shows should have this opportunity, but there's a certain stipulation that if you're not properly representing both sides of the political aisle, then this is not okay. Now, it didn't work for The View, from my understanding, because it was like, it wasn't a political show for sure. It wasn't a news show. It was just like they're just chatting it up. And then in this one, this is a talk show with Colbert, and there's supposed to be an exception for there, but CBS pulled it anyway. And this is also not the first time that Donald Trump did something like this with the FCC, because we remember the stuff that happened with, what was it, Jimmy Kimmel? Is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Kimmel?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Why does Donald Trump hate free speech?
I think it's mostly just because the more speech that gets out about the crazy actions that this administration is doing, the more likely it is that the American people aren't going to like it, right? Like, it seems wholly consistent with everything that Donald Trump has done throughout this term that we are not interested in more information. We're interested in less information. We're not interested in anything that contradicts any of the narratives that this administration has. We're only interested in things that corroborate it, right? That's why like the amount of reporting, that 60 Minutes report on CCOT ended up getting pulled back. That's why a lot of the anti-Israel protesters were getting their student visas revoked. That's why you're seeing like a certain bigger hand in the DOJ to prosecute political opponents, a certain bigger hand in the FCC to try and pull certain people with different political opinions. Like, do you guys know who Hayden Rodea is by chance?
No.
He's just a conservative debater person, and we were talking about like the Biden administration, the Biden administration action against the private companies. At the end of the day, I don't think those were like actual violations of the First Amendment. But like, even if you just look at the way that these politicians talk about it, right? Like, I have never seen any time that Donald Trump has advocated for like saying something like, oh yeah, I disagree with this person, but he has the right to say it. I've never heard anything akin to that come out of Donald Trump, anybody as a part of the Trump administration. All I've ever heard is Pam Bondi saying that we need to start prosecuting hate speech. Like, it's really made me question like the values, like or the adherence to values that a lot of Americans have to like the Constitution or the founding principles, because all of the people who are crying like freedom of speech 10 years ago or even 5 years ago because of the Twitter files are dead silent now on like the actual real retributions against people for their political speech.
Yeah. No, I was also going to say, Pam Bondi, and just, people on Fox, in like Tucker Carlson are constantly engaging in like calling basically what they're saying is hate speech. They're basically saying if it's like hating on Trump or hating on somebody who's loyal to Trump is kind of their definition of it. They're not talking about it really in terms of a protected person, unless God forbid. And when I say protected person, I mean like protected group, as viewed by most hate speech laws. So unless God forbid it's like a black guy or Hispanic guy or an Asian person who is a Trump supporter and running for Congress or something, otherwise they're not going to call it out. They don't care about actual hate speech. They're talking about, I guess, what you could call political hate speech, and all they seem to do is kind of backpedal and say, oh, the Democrats, the liberals are the ones engaging in hate speech towards us. When in fact, Republicans on numerous occasions have engaged in hate speech, with there being memes, for example, I think of, I want to say it was even of Trump saying that he would dress up as Nancy Pelosi's husband in a
Trump Jr.
with a pair of underpants on, a hammer, to kind of make fun of the attempted assassination on him for Halloween. So, I mean, that just shows you they don't actually really care about free speech. They care more about just who's going to be loyal to them. That's it at this point. And if you're a black guy who's loyal to them, they'll back you up. But if you're not, they're just going to call you, a thug or something. If you're a Hispanic who's not, then they're going to call you an illegal immigrant or find some sort of stupid reason to get rid of you. It's really quite disturbing. And it's just a very common trend we see across all sorts of authoritarian governments in the Soviet Union, Iraq, Venezuela. It's not just, I'm trying to stay away from the famous comparison, but yeah, it's just typical authoritarianism.
Hey man, they keep on inching closer and closer to that famous comparison. So I don't know what you want me to do, but ultimately, it is kind of crazy to me that this is that wasn't even the worst hate speech. Donald Trump, I'm going to say, strongly alluded to hanging congressmen. I mean, at this point, I don't know what you have to say for this to truly be considered hate speech. But it's also very hypocritical because talk shows are a type of content. So are podcasts. They're basically the same thing. The amount of podcasts that Donald Trump has been on, especially leading up to the election, Joe Rogan didn't have Kamala Harris. MAGA doesn't give a fuck. Flagrant didn't have Kamala Harris. Again, they don't give a fuck. And then while he's president, he went on a podcast with Dan Bongino. Like, what are we doing right now? He is more than fine with appearing on platforms to push his message and agenda. It's not about fairness. It's not about trying to abide by the principles of what free speech is. It's, as you guys said, control of information. Control of information, control of messaging, and control of propaganda. Now, the weird thing about this one in particular, though, James Tallarico doesn't talk about Trump like that at all. He doesn't talk shit about Trump compared to Jasmine Crockett. She would go crazy on Trump. So what this tells me, it's not about him saying bad things about Trump. He's genuinely scared against Tallarico that if Tallarico wins the primary for Democrats in Texas, Tallarico will also win against a Republican. He's genuinely frightened against this guy. And right now, from what I saw about polls while I was talking about this on a video, it does look like Crockett is leading in the polls, but we'll see how this manifests. I think part of it is because of like the whole like racism allegations regarding something some TikToker said about him. I don't know what's true or not. I don't know if he's putting on a show or not. But what I do know is that Tallarico, regarding religion and Christianity, there is nobody on the MAGA side that will be able to compete with him. They won't be able to compete with him regarding referencing scripture. They won't be able to compete with him in talking about morals and how it relates to current behavior and the overall principles of God. This aspect, I think, is a interesting hole for MAGA because Democrats typically don't preach Christianity on part of their platform, but MAGA does, and they don't really get challenged for it, even though I think most of them are fake Christians in the first place that don't actually care about the Bible, and most of them don't give a shit about the New Testament. But even though Christians are all about the New Testament, and there's a glaring hypocrisy there. I think if they go up against Tallarico, who will reference the New Testament, who will be a true Christian, they will be destroyed and lose a lot of Christian voters. So that's kind of my hypothesis on why he's so scared of Tallarico. What are y'all thoughts?
You go first, Reynald.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a compelling thing. There's also like something that's consistent with the rest of the actions that Trump does, where like there's a reason why he's not going after like the Kamala Harrises, the Barack Obamas, the AOCs, and I think it's because there's kind of like a perception amongst the Trump administration. I'm not super familiar with Tallarico, but like you kind of focus on the people that you can bully first. So if there's not going to be like, he targeted Jimmy Kimmel because even people on the left don't really love Jimmy Kimmel because of his history, like during the 2020 election, when he was trying to like get the election decertified, he wasn't targeting Democrats. He wasn't targeting Democrat states. He was targeting Republican leaders in swing states, right? He was targeting Raffensperger. He was targeting Mike Pence, right? So it's the kind of thing where like you're going to, I think they're really smart in who they target because they're targeting people who are on the outs. And the fact that Tallarico has that racism allegation that he's running against Crockett may even play into that as well, where they'll target people who are already on the outs. So even though they are very blatant attacks, nobody's going to have any love loss over targeting James Comey or targeting Letitia James or targeting like all these people who kind of are on the outs with the Democratic Party anyway. So it could be partially too that like he's targeting people like Stephen Colbert or James Tallarico because he knows that he can with as minimal pushback as possible.
Very fair.
Yeah. Regarding Stephen Colbert, one of the things I was reading about it today is that part of the reason Colbert even did this and called out CBS is he's like, yeah, I'm leaving soon anyway, so I don't give a crap what you guys say or think about me. But kind of going on for y'all's point, as well as Tallarico, I mean, him being on the outside, I feel like it's just to try and get swing voters to potentially not vote for this guy. And if he can get this to be canceled, him airing, that could possibly benefit a Republican. It just does Trump even more favors because this guy's getting less screen time, is what it's all about. In the meantime, though, he's not going to be able to do it to someone like Kamala or to Barack Obama. Well, Barack Obama isn't even running, but he's not going to do it to someone like Kamala or to AOC, given the fact they already have a pretty big following, especially AOC. I mean, she's like a household name at this point, whether you like her or hate her. So it's like the people already know she's going to run. People know what she stands for. No point in trying to target her. So try and target this smaller dude who has controversies in his past. The only thing is Stephen Colbert might have helped him a lot more. It might be kind of like a Streisand effect, so to speak, where people are now going to remember, oh, James Tallarico, I'm going to go look into him and see more about what his platform is, because clearly there's a reason why Trump is targeting this guy. He must be doing something right.
I agree to that. I do think this is going to backfire majorly on Trump. If we look at the numbers too, there is definitely a realization that even though YouTube is a big platform, we all recognize that as like young individuals, even though I'm getting old, I'm becoming an old man, we typically get our information online, social media. Well, I wouldn't say social media, but just like news that we can look up and find pretty effectively and pretty efficiently. The comparison is that people on mainstream television are typically older people. Older people get their news from like the different networks that I was referring to. So when you bring up the aspect of swing votes, there probably is a calculation there that we want him to not be exposed to the older voters. And the older voters will heavily, typically be Christian as well. There is an interesting calculation there, very effective one for an authoritarian regime that is trying to control our elections. But yeah, there is something to how they're doing it. And even if there is a Streisand effect where a lot more people are going to say, wait, why is Donald Trump trying to silence this guy? I'm unsure if that will have the effect on the voters that we're referring to in terms of like the nonpartisan older individual that just be watching TV and watching CBS, CNN, sometimes Fox, all those stuff. We will see. We will see if this plays an effect. But hey, man,
Real quick, I have to go. I appreciate you guys letting me up. It was nice meeting you guys.
Yeah, it was good meeting you. Talk to
nice
you later.
meeting you as well. Shout out to Rinwald from coming on the conversation. But that's a very important thing to watch out for. The growth of Tallarico, the influence of Tallarico in particular, and what it will mean for the elections. I've been paying attention to very particular figures and how they can kind of not reform the Democratic Party, because I do think it gets overplayed, but create a different alternative on like to appeal to voters. That's the best characterization. We've seen Mamdani do what he did. We see Graham Plattner, even though he has the weird allegations with the Nazi tattoo in Maine. And now we see Tallarico, who has some of the allegations regarding potential racism. But all of them are candidates that provide something different. So that's something very interesting indeed. Last topic before we start wrapping things up, the stuff regarding the EPA. If people are not aware, Donald Trump and the MAGA administration decided to cut one specific aspect of the EPA where basically they're not going to be holding these companies liable for putting more disgusting gas in the atmosphere. I saw a couple of the different gases that they're referring to, like methane, I believe nitrogen, CO2, obviously, and then some other ones with very long names that I can't repeat. But now they're not going to be kind of, like I said, held liable, because that's what typically it does. It's not forcing these companies not to do it. It's giving people the opportunity to pressure them, whether that's like a lawsuit or something, because they're like toxifying the atmosphere. And that's all removed. And they said, oh, we're about to get more money. But in reality, it's the rich people that's going to get more money, and they don't give a fuck. And now we're going to have a more toxic atmosphere that's very dangerous for people to inhale and breathe. What are your thoughts, Danny?
Well, it's clearly just being done for like the auto industry and for the oil industry. That's all Trump's doing this for, is just setting us back in terms of technology, and is preventing us from engaging in any sort of a quote unquote Green New Deal where we invest in green technologies to power our cities for the future and our cars, so on and so forth. It's stupid, and you're right, it is bad for the environment. I mean, the United States is one of the top polluters in the world, and even though China, of course, pollutes a lot, they're actually leading in terms of producing green technology forms for their cities and their infrastructure. So it's going to cause a lot of issues for the U.S. and for the world unless it's reversed. I have no idea how many problems it would exactly cause, given the fact I'm not a climate scientist. And let's say in 2028, a Democrat's elected, 2029, they come into office and reverse this immediately and reinstate the Obama era plans. I don't know what the environmental damage would be. It's just completely foreign to me. However, what I will say is this is definitely just trying to help out the oil and auto industries. It's not going to help out the consumers that much. I mean, gas in the United States, last I checked, it wasn't anything extraordinary. There were a few times where, especially when I was living in Iowa, it was down to like $1.75 a barrel up outside of Cedar Rapids. So if anything, it seems like this is something that's more so to punish the companies, and Trump's trying to help them, probably because a lot of these oil executives are connected to Donald Trump and funding him.
Yeah, Well, I did like a deep dive in terms of I watched this video and had a kind of an epiphany regarding economics in the United States. And one of the things that they were talking about is why are we not completely collapsing on ourselves regarding the economy, considering how many of the policies Donald Trump is doing has been so shit. There have been terrible economic policies, specifically his tariffs. And one of the conclusions that was made here is that Donald Trump in particular has he's out of like most presidents throughout U.S. history, especially in the 21st century, he has this weird like direct connection with the like very elite business owners, and that direct connection is kind of allows them to kind of work with him and kind of price things in to keep the economy stable. Now they're keeping it stable and like they're able to negotiate with him, which is why Donald Trump has been rescinding tariffs, doing tariffs and rescinding him. That's why when he did the Venezuela stuff and he was tried to take over their oil, he brought in oil investors and they told him, "Now this is not a good idea." So he started backtracking there, and that's why when he tried to take over Greenland, they were like, "This you're destroying the stock market," and it plummeted. Then he said, "You know what? Never mind. I don't want to take over Greenland." Everything he does is based off like what the big investors are saying and what the stock market is saying. And that's very dangerous considering it makes our economy extremely volatile. But the business owners have the money, they have the influence, they have the direct connections to keep the economy as is because of this relationship with Trump. Whereas the small business owners are all getting screwed over and losing their businesses left and right. So it's a very clear hierarchy. And what it seems like is going to happen from this situation is this is going to deregulate much more clearly, and it's going to allow more opportunity for the very, very successful investors because like the top 10% affect like 50% of the economy, kind of crazy. But if they can deregulate and build more from their ends, regardless of what's happening to the environment, it's going to make it look like the economy is doing better than it actually is. But in reality, the top are just doing way better than everybody else. And that gap is going to continuously grow. It's kind of crazy. Not going to lie.
Yeah, no, it's really just the epitome of why saying judging a country by its GDP or gross domestic product does not really say much about the state of living in that country or how small businesses are doing. GDP, it's like, for example, people love to cite regularly that Mississippi has a higher GDP than the majority of European countries. But most people in Mississippi they have access to less healthcare. They have access to less education. They have less safety in terms of their worker safety, but also physical safety compared to the average European. I mean, if you were to ask most people on the street, where would you rather live? Would you rather live in France or Mississippi? They're probably going to tell you I'd rather live in France because France has that higher standard of living. But Mississippi does have a big real estate market, and real estate is what drives that entire state. So therefore, it makes it look like Mississippi is doing really well. When in reality, I can remember talking to some kids in college who did like Peace Corps missions or missions with their churches to Mississippi, and they were in towns that didn't even have power, which is pretty astonishing that is in America, which is theoretically the richest country in the world. Or not theoretically, according to GDP is, but do we have the best living standards? I don't know about that. So it's really more or less just that. And the oil companies, they're not going to tell Trump, don't do this, even if it hurts the economy, because it won't hurt the economy. We haven't invested that much into green energy. If these were like green energy executives, they might tell Trump, hey, what are you doing? This is going to hurt the economy. But we haven't made that transition already. So this is I see it as maybe a last-ditch effort to try and save oil in America and not just move on and diversify what we use in terms of energy. That would seem like the smarter choice at this point as they continue going in that direction. But that's not what's going to happen, at least until maybe 2029.
I do find the aspect of Gavin Newsom threatening to sue. Like there's certain like individuals and that are suing because of this EPA, and Gavin Newsom being one of them. I find Gavin Newsom's moves recently very interesting because not only is that happening, but obviously we saw what he did with, what was it called, Prop 40, I believe, and now he's going to get into trade negotiations with the UK, and it's like he's trying to make California its like own independent nation, and he's building stock and is influencing and building relationships with other countries. And California, in all intents and purposes, can do this. It has a lot of land, and its economy is the fourth largest in the world. So I find his moves very interesting, but that's why I plan to look into Gavin Newsom more to see like what is this guy? What is going on with this guy? Is he worse than I've been hearing? Is he better than I've been hearing? I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion. I don't live in California, so he's not my primary focus, but he might be the future president of the United States, so might be time to tap in. Now, you said something interesting regarding oil. Sometimes I go like, what's the plan here? Because we've already been leading in terms of oil production for a long time. Like we're leading with Joe Biden. I think we were leading in first term Donald Trump. I don't know if we were leading Obama. I don't remember. But for at the very least, for the last 8 years, we've been leading in oil production. And I know people need to realize this. In terms of gas prices, people think that Trump has an effect. He barely has an effect. But you know what does have an effect? OPSEC. They have an effect. It's like all the like big countries that manage so much of the oil, that have so much of the oil, they can make decisions on determining like gas prices. Does he think he can compete with the OPSEC by himself with the United States? How much more can you do at this point? I don't get the calculation here. What do you think?
I mean, it's a cartel. No, I don't think he really can. Right now, part of the reason oil, at least internationally, has been so cheap is because Saudi Arabia has decided to start pumping and selling more oil than before, which has affected gas prices around the world. Then also, you know, the U.S. is still in a very competitive position here, but Saudi Arabia is just deciding to pump all this right now. And I don't quite understand why. I don't really have the best answer for you. But what I will say is Trump can't really do much more about the oil prices. It's kind of based on what these oil executives plan to do. And it's ironic because a lot of this isn't being done in the United States. I mean, the United States is doing it. We are pumping more oil. We do have a lot of companies in Saudi Arabia, but it's the Saudis themselves saying we're just going to start doing this right now, which is causing the price of oil in the West to go down so much. And internationally, I mean, this wasn't part of the question, but I know, for example, with Russia, this is causing a problem with them because they trade Brent crude, and theirs is selling for like around $34 a gallon. And that's causing them to basically be running on a deficit at this point. So it's very strange, ultimately, why Trump is doing this for the economic reasons. Again, I think overall it's just to benefit American oil executives. That's it. That's all he's trying to do.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I remember when I looked into it too, that his kind of new ventures in drilling more oil actually has been having a negative effect on oil prices for the United States. And they've been actually drilling less because of it. So even though I think they've been making more rigs, but in terms of overall like percentage or totality of drilling itself, that has gone down from the Biden era. So yeah, we'll see how everything plays out. This just seems like a weird calculation to make in regards to the EPA. But yeah. Before we wrap up, I do want to address this. So just a lot of topics, a lot of good conversations before we start closing today. So we never actually got to talk about like the social media stuff that's been happening. I don't know
Oh
how
yeah.
much you've been paying attention to it, but a couple of countries have already decided to ban social media for teenagers. So 16 and under, or 15 and under, depends on the country. And now there's going to be conversations regarding the United States. But even some, I believe Discord is an American company. I don't know that for a fact, but I think it is. Even some American companies or some American aligned companies are changing their social media policies. I know TikTok is changing theirs. And Discord made a new policy where they are requiring everybody to scan their face for to ensure that, or scan their face or ID to ensure that you are over the age that you say you are, so we can like moderate children better on the platform. Um, and then there's going to be a bigger conversation on like Meta and their responsibilities, who owns not only Facebook but also Instagram. And there's going to be like a hearing regarding social media companies as well in the future. But a bunch of countries in general are being very making a very strong stance. Australia, I believe Spain and France have been discussing it or have already started doing it. So we are moving in the trajectory where countries and people are becoming a little bit more black pilled on social media, in particular its effect on children. Oh, what are your thoughts?
I think it's positive overall that we're having this conversation. First of all, I want to say I don't think, I mean, I wish I wasn't on social media when I was a kid. I only actually, I can even remember being a teenager and being like, oh, social media is evil. And everyone was saying, what do you mean it's evil? And I was like, no, it's bad. We shouldn't use it. And then I ended up getting it because I was on a rowing team and I was convinced to download Facebook so I could friend everybody. And I was like, okay. And it is addictive. I mean, for God's sakes, even as an adult, my main addiction now, I would say, is YouTube Shorts. I watch YouTube Shorts way too much. I think that shit should be banned. I could also just try to fix myself, but you know. Point being, though, is it is addictive, and I do understand why countries are trying to do this. Is to prevent their kids from just be constantly scrolling on their phones or on their iPads. And not doing anything better with their lives. I think it's especially a concern when it comes to stuff like TikTok and, again, YouTube Shorts, because that stuff is made to be as addictive as possible. They hit all of your receptors in your brain. Teenagers especially are going to be extremely susceptible to that in school. But it's also being done to prevent cyberbullying. Is obviously a huge concern. Kind of weird to think we're having that conversation right now because I haven't talked about that really since I was like a teenager, effectively. But cyberbullying is still going on, and even when I worked as a driver's ed instructor back when about a year ago, a lot of the kids were saying that cyberbullying is actually worse now than it was when I was in school. Like, oh yeah, there's constantly people harassing each other on like Instagram, Facebook, occasionally, TikTok, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of reasons to do this. The question is the method correct? And it's honestly the only method I can think of right now, and that is you have to take a picture of your government ID and upload it to the website, and then that will confirm if you're allowed to be on the website or not. Or unless you get the restricted version, maybe, which is what Discord's going to do. And I like the intent. I'm questionable about how we're doing it. I personally don't have a problem with it. I don't really care, but I know it really freaks a lot of people out that their government ID would be given over to executives, even if the executives are claiming, hey, we're going to delete it all within like 90 minutes of you uploading it anyway, so don't worry about it. So the real question now is privacy. Is it worth giving up more of our privacy to keep our kids safe on the internet, or is this something we need to delegate to the parents more? I guess if I had to come down with an answer, I would say it's worth it. And maybe we can find a different solution in the future. But I don't see how any solution in the future wouldn't also be incredibly invasive, or if not more invasive than giving over your government ID at this point.
So yeah, I want to be very clear. I am no longer interested in the "I'll just let parents handle it" argument. We tried. It has not worked. Parents are not doing their jobs, and that's just the simple fact. There can be a conversation in better media literacy education, and I actually abide by that. Um, but I think there needs to be a understanding that if the parents aren't doing their jobs, then sometimes the government has to step in. And there is a calculation of safety versus privacy that I understand. But in this situation, like from when I look at my ID, most of the information on my ID is already on my Discord profile. If we're being
Yeah.
honest, it's mostly already on your social media profile. You put your birthday, you put your name. You typically for a profile picture, you put your face.
Yeah.
I mean, what exactly? There will have your driver's license ID, maybe, or your. I don't know what the difference between a license or a state ID would be, but it will be deleted from my understanding, or at the very least, put in a very secure database. And of course, there's hacking, but it's not like they're asking for your social security number. So
Yeah.
I think this is, and someone brought this up. One of my boys in a different group chat I'm in, and he was like, "Bro, we got to talk about this. This is a big deal." And my response to him was like, "It's actually not. It's actually not a big deal. It's no big deal." That was my response. I think when we considering the safety of the children, considering how many children have been manipulated, groomed on Discord, we need to take this step. I advocate for my solution has always been social media companies should create a very clear kid version of all the social medias. They
Yeah.
don't do that. They don't want to invest in those resources at all. So if they're not going to do their job and the parents are not going to do their job, the government has to get involved. They just do. Because kids, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You finish your statement.
Okay. Because kids are being not only in danger of creeps on the internet, they're being heavily influenced in their growth. That's arguably the most dangerous part because kids are spending most of their time being influenced by someone on a phone or a laptop. Their whole vernacular, their whole belief system, sometimes their morals. We see all these people that are getting fucking manipulated by people like Nick Fuentes or Andrew Tate. A lot of them are just lonely teenagers that don't know any better, and then they see this guy, and their whole fucking framework gets shifted and manipulated. Come to find out, both of these guys are pieces of shit, and your whole morals are fucked up because the parents are not doing their job.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, with the Andrew Tate stuff, I'd heard from a lot of teachers when I worked as a substitute teacher. A lot of teachers were saying, "Oh yeah, like the boys have really messed up ideas about sex and about women that are very prejudicial in about even their appearances because of Andrew Tate." I've heard from them just online from other schools, so not actually. This is more hearsay, I guess you could say, what I'm saying right now. But people saying that they've heard kids saying, boys saying more far right and anti-female, saying anti-female or misogynistic, making misogynistic statements. And it just shows you how much misinformation there is and how the internet can be so easily used to radicalize these kids. And I remember just 2 years ago, I would go on YouTube Shorts because I was still around then, and you would immediately see a bunch of Andrew Tate videos of him talking about like how he would have sex with women at clubs all the time. And I honestly think he was kind of bullshitting a lot of the time with these stories. But they do that, then they have like Minecraft or GTA 5 gameplay under it. So it's clear they're trying to appeal towards young kids or teenagers. And
more anecdotal experiences real quick is like there's that viral clip with Sneeko where he went to a convention and then there was kids, like genuine kids that were repeating some of the things he was saying about women and trans people. Crazy things kids are saying. And he's like, and he was shocked that kids are saying this. And people don't recognize most of these there's another bigger conversation in terms of like where all this money is coming from. But that's an example. And then there's a recent example of this one influencer. He's like 22 years old. And there's some teenagers that come up to him and they talk about Hail Hitler, or they're referencing this other dictator. I'm like, bro, get off the internet. What are you talking about? But yeah, go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and also kind of going off of that, it would also make the internet better for adults. I mean, back when we were younger, we had like Club Penguin, which was a perfectly safe place for kids to go. It was monitored by Disney, and I don't remember honestly having any real bad experiences there. I remember when I became a teenager, I tried saying fuck in Club Penguin or whatever, and I get banned for a day because I thought that was hilarious. But I don't remember like any groomers or anything. I don't remember really any cyberbullying when I was actually using it as a kid, because they did such a good job banning people, as I proved when I was a teenager. And kind of going a little bit further than that as well, it would benefit the internet for adults because, you wouldn't have YouTubers or you wouldn't have like YouTubers being worried about losing ad revenue for either saying swears in their videos or for using words like kill instead of unalive, or instead of saying pedophile as a PDF file, which is just result in a stupid form of censorship. And a big amount of that is these companies don't want to give money to YouTubers or don't want them to be associated with YouTubers that say this stuff so they can appeal more family friendly. And it's like, just create a second version. I mean, there's already a second version of YouTube. I don't know why they're still doing this. I think it's stupid. I guess it's just for the ad revenue. But it's just leading to unnecessary censorship in the first place. So ultimately, yeah, I think it'd be overall good. I don't really care. Again, my face is already on the internet. I'm talking on this thing with you. I have had Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. I've had dating profiles. My face is all over the place theoretically, but then you Google me and there's no information on me, So I don't care. I really don't care. And besides, we're all still getting scam calls, and that's happening before any of this is happening. And we're all getting scam emails anyways. And that's been going on for a long time. So I honestly don't know what to say. All I can say is this isn't going to make things that much worse. And maybe pass a law that says the companies have to delete your Face ID within 24 hours or so.
And I think that's perfectly reasonable. There is a larger conversation, and we probably won't go in too much detail regarding this, but I do think this might be a conversation to eventually have. There is a interesting calculation that I'm sure a lot of these social media companies are considering. Whether they want to agree or not, a lot of money is being lost if kids can't go on social media. A lot of ad revenue, a lot of the kids that watch these streamers, a lot of their viewership is going to be getting lost with kids being banned from social media. So I am curious on the economic impact kids being banned from social media will have at large. And I'm assuming it's going to be huge. I do think, even though they're supposed to have these checks in place, these kids are going on there. Sometimes they use their own money. A lot of time they use their parents' money. And they are putting a lot of money into these big corporations. Like we see this manifest for video games, for example. How many kids are buying V-Bucks? V-Bucks. Like, come on. That's something that means nothing. So now manifest this for like super chats or memberships, and the amount of watch time you get will determine how much ad revenue you get. I do think that is going to be a big part of the conversation because regarding social media bans. That's why I can't see it happening in the United States, because the big corporations will all do whatever it takes to lobby like crazy to ensure that they do not ban kids from this company because they're making way too much money from it. But I think that's a huge part of the conversation.
Oh yeah, no, it's a major part of the conversation, and ultimately, I don't really care what social media companies say. They're still going to be making billions of dollars a year. They'll have to change their approach, and ironically, there's this one thing called the EU effect, which is every time the EU passes certain consumer rights laws, that it then ultimately is easier for those companies to then just implement it on a global scale. So because of the EU effect, we now all have USB-C for iPhones, for example. And then another reason is we all websites mandate that you are allowed to manage your cookies and what information people websites can collect on you. So I think that maybe if the EU does something first, then it's going to change it all in America, just because it's going to be easier for Google and for TikTok to do that. And TikTok's about to be owned by the U.S. government, which I kind of forgot about. Or I think it is.
Hey, well, they're working on a deal with like some investors and Oracle. They're going to own a version parts of TikTok. Whatchamacallit is still going to own a big share of TikTok too. I think in general, with all these companies coming together, America will have the majority share, but I do think that the Chinese company still has a large share as well.
Oh yeah, ByteDance, yeah.
ByteDance, that's what they're called, ByteDance. And then there was one more thing that that you said that made me think of something. If this EU effect really is manifesting into something, the fact that I think it was the EU or maybe just one country, them looking into Elon Musk, because there's a lot of very strong allegations that he has been purposefully altering Twitter for his own purposes, and he won't reveal the information and the data about it. Hey man, well, I'm all here for getting Elon Musk the fuck out of Twitter, because that dude is crazy. Last thing, breaking news: California Governor Gavin Newsom sues Trump over the termination of $1.2 billion in congressionally approved funding for the nation's largest hydrogen hub. Newsom making moves, man. This guy he wants to smoke.
Yeah, he's definitely messing with Trump and trying to be as much of a pain in the ass to him as possible. And I think it's going to bring him really far when it comes to the elections when the 2028 election cycle starts, more or less in 2027. But I think at the end of 2026, we'll start to see some people announcing their candidature.
Yeah, with this Prop 50, with him trolling Trump on the internet, he has his own podcast. So it's just looking like Newsom's doing all the right things. I'm just being honest. It seems like he's doing all the right things. So it's crazy that Hassan Piker would vote third party instead of. All right. Well, anyway. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, that is all we got for the Socratic Breakdown, where we have open conversations about pressing issues every single week. These are open panels, so people are able to come on and have the conversation as well. You do have to join my Discord so I can ensure you're not crazy or you're not weird. I can't just throw it in the chat because I don't know who is going to be over there. And anytime anybody wants to join, ask questions, be a part of the conversation, let us know as well. So with that said, we'll be back next week. Oh, no, we won't be back next week on the YouTube channel, but podcast episodes drop every Thursday, 8 a.m. EST. With that said, I hope you guys enjoy it. You have a good one. Take care.